بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. أما بعد, my brothers and sisters, I starting a new of lessons, and this is about Dawood alayhi salam. In our series of lectures on lessons from the Anbiya alayhi salam, we have completed. When I say completed, I'm always, I warn myself and remind myself that we don't complete. I mean, only Allah can complete. Knows all the lessons that are contained in the lives of His Anbiya alayhi salam. So when I say completed, it is within the limits of my limited understanding of whatever I have tried to study. And the purpose of this class and all these classes is only one, and that is to practice what we learn. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make that easy for us and to make us among those who can benefit from this practice. So we have completed, to the extent possible, the lessons from the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam and from the life of again one of the greatest prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood alayhi salam is one of two Anbiya who were also kings. He and his son Sulaiman alayhi salam, both of them were kings. They were among the greatest kings of Bani Israel. Sulaiman alayhi salam, by his dua which he made to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made dua and said, "Oh Allah, grant me a kingdom the like of which you have never given to anybody." And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him a kingdom which was not only on the earth, on land, it was not only rulership over human beings, but also over jinn. And Allah made birds and animals also obedient to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him the speech of birds and animals, and including insects. And we know from Surah An-Naml that the conversation that Ibrahim alayhi salam, not conversation, but he heard the speech of the queen ant in Wadi An-Naml, the Valley of the Ants, where the queen ant instructed the other ants, she instructed the workers to get back into the anthill, lest they be inadvertently trampled upon by the army of Sulaiman alayhi salam. We know Sulaiman alayhi salam's conversation with the Hudhud, with the Hoopoe, and the information that he brought from about Bilqis, the queen of Sheba, and what that happened as a result of that. We know the story of the jinn, Ifrit min al-Jinn, one of the big leaders and one of the most powerful of the jinn, who promised to bring the throne of Bilqis to Sulaiman alayhi salam. Bilqis was in her kingdom, which was in present day Yemen. Sulaiman alayhi salam was in Palestine, and this jinn he offered to bring, and he said, "I am Qawiyun Amin." Qawiyul Amin, he said, "I am strong and I am trustworthy, and I will bring this throne here before you finish your darbar, before you finish audience and this meeting of yours with your courtiers and your ministers and so on." And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, but there was a man, and Allah didn't even mention the name of the man, who had some knowledge of the book. Which book? Whether it was a Zabur, which was the book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed to the father of Sulaiman alayhi salam, Dawood alayhi salam, about whom this present class is. I'm telling you the story about Sulaiman as a add-on to that, or some other book. Allah knows best. And that man said, he just said, just look away. He said, before you blink your eye, I will bring the throne. The jinn said, I will go there and bring it. The man said, I don't have to go anywhere. The throne will come by itself. And that's what happened. Now, these were the two kings of Bani Israel who were also Anbiya, who were also among the greatest of the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were righteous people, and they were the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, we believe in all the prophets that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in His Kalam. We believe in all the prophets that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned to us. We believe that all of them are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that all of them are Anbiya, all of them are the prophets. Some of them are Rusul, some of them are messengers also. Some of them are Ahlul Kitab. Some of them were sent laws and books. Others came to reinforce the book that was sent before. So, for example, Sulaiman alayhi salam followed the Zabur, Isa alayhi salam followed the Torah, which was revealed to Musa alayhi salam, and so on and so forth. And then we believe in Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam as the Imam of all of them, as the Imam al-Anbiya, and Sayyid Saleen as the Sayyid and the leader and the most important of all of the Rasuls. And we believe in him and we follow him alone. And we follow the book that he brought alone. We believe that all the books that Allah revealed to all the messengers, those we know and those we don't know. We know only the Torah, the Zabur, and the Injil. We don't know, and the Sunnah. We don't know about the others, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must have revealed books to other prophets also. Those are now lost. We don't follow any of those books. We believe that those books were also divine. They were also revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their original form. The changes that people have wrought in those books, the changes that people have made in those books, the onus of that change, the responsibility for that lies with the people who made those changes. Those changes are not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only the original book is from Allah. So we do not believe in the changes in those books. We believe in the original book which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In most cases, that originality of the book is lost. So therefore we say that the Torah is a book of Allah in its original form. The Injil is a book of Allah in its original form. What people have done to the Torah, what people have done to the Injil, what people have done to the Zabur is completely lost. It doesn't even exist anymore. And Suhuf Ibrahim, again lost. That we don't believe. I do not believe, except don't say that the changes are divine. They are not divine. The changes are human. People have done it. We also believe that those people who made those changes had no right to make those changes, and so they were at fault. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with them in the way that He sees fit. The issue is that as far as we are concerned, we follow the Quran because this is the last of the books. There is no change in it. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved it, and He promised this. He said, Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafizun. Allah said, verily we have sent down our dhikr, our mention, and we will guard it. And by the dhikr is meant the kalam, the literal words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as well as the explanation of those words, which is contained in the authentic sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the Sahih Hadith, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained the words, the meanings, and the intentions of the words. It makes complete sense to understand it in this way, and it does not make sense to understand it in any other way. If you say that Allah preserved the word without its meaning, it makes absolutely no sense. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved the word, He also preserved. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Aqimus Salah. He said, establish the Salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also preserved the way the Salah is to be performed, and that we do not have in the Quran, that we have in the Sunnah, in the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, pay zakat, and he told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to collect zakat, how much, on what, and so on and so forth, is from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah did not mention how much and all that in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He told us to make Hajj to His house, what are the arkan of that Hajj? What is the method of making Hajj? What constitutes Hajj? In the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, make Hajj to His house, whereas on the day of Hajj we are standing away from the house, we are standing in Arafat. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam standing in Arafat, his Hajj has not been done. Now, all of this points very clearly to the fact of the importance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Islam, in Islamic law, in the establishment of Islam. It points to the importance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our lives. It points to the importance of following the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam without trying to change anything in that, or without trying to deny that guidance. Those who deny the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have denied the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And man yahdihillahu fahuwa al-muhtad wa man yudlil falan tajida lahu waliyan murshida. The one who Allah guides cannot be misguided, and the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves to follow his own will and desires, which means that the person has chosen to be misguided and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left him like that. For him there is no murshid, and there is no wali, there is no one to guide him, and there is no he doesn't have any friend and any protector or any advocate for him. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the best guidance, which is his kitab. Inna asdaqul hadithi kitab Allah wa khairul hadi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The best speech is the kitab of Allah, and the best guidance is the guidance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to understand and to live by his kitab, and to benefit from the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, better than which there is no other guidance. Now, to continue with the story of Dawud alayhi salam. Dawud alayhi salam was, as I said to you, one of the greatest of the messengers of the Anbiya, of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I told you, he is one of two kings. The other Anbiya were not kings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give nubuwwat to kings except to these two. Very interesting, from what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam, he took out all his progeny from his back and he showed them to Adam alayhi salam. Now, there were prophets among them, clearly distinct from others, and out of them Adam alayhi salam saw one who was glowing, who stood out. So Adam alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, Ya Rabbi, O my Rabb, who is this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, this is your son Dawood. Adam alayhi salam said, Ya Allah, what is his age? How long will he live? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, he will live for 60 years. So Adam alayhi salam said, Ya Allah, increase his age. Give him a longer lifespan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, what is written for him is written for him, except that I can take something from your age and increase his age. Now Adam alayhi salam's lifespan was 1000 years. And so he gave Dawud alayhi salam 40 years out of that. Now when the age of Adam alayhi salam came to an end, when it was time for him to die, Malakul Maut came to him, and this happens only to the Anbiya. Malakul Maut comes, greets, takes permission. So Malakul Maut came to him, and Adam alayhi salam said, no, you are too early. I still have 40 years left. So Malakul Maut said to him, you gave away 40 years of your life to your son Dawood. So this is the right time. So Adam alayhi salam it was uh, he had forgotten about this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, granted Adam alayhi salam his original age of 1000 years. And to Dawood alayhi salam, Allah gave that 40 years. So He gave him 100 years. And this is from the hadith of Imam Ahmad and also in Tirmidhi. Dawood alayhi salam was a young man from the city of Bethlehem, and his father chosen 3 of his sons to join Talut's army. Talut was the king that Allah gave to the Bani Israel. They made dua. They said, give us a king so that we can establish a kingdom in your name. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them Talut as a king to establish a kingdom in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name. Now, the mother of Dawud, he told him not to take part in the fighting. And he said, your other 2 brothers will fight, but your job is to help the army in other ways and to report back to the family about what was happening on the war front. Now, when they went there and when they reached, when they were facing the army of the Philistines, there was, they made dua. The Bani Israel, they made dua. They said, Rabbana afriq alayna sabran wa sabbit aqdamana wansurna ala al-qawmi al-kafirin. In Surah Al-Baqarah, we have this ayat 250. They said, Allah said, when they advanced to meet Jalut and his forces, they prayed, our Rabb, pour out constancy and sabr and fortitude and strength on us. Afriq alayna sabr. Afriq is to like pouring it with a bucket, plentiful. Afriq alayna sabran wa thabbit aqdamana wansurna ala al-qawmi al-kafirin, and make our feet firm and give us victory over these people who are your deniers. Now, what happened in that battle was interesting. It is, one of the ways of medieval and earlier battles was as follows, which is that before the actual battle was engaged in, there were 2 or 3 things that these armies did, the medieval armies and earlier than that. One was they made a lot of noise. They had drums and bugles and this and that, and a lot of the martial music which even today is done. Today, of course, is done more ceremoniously, where you march to these martial tunes. All of this comes from that time, which is people marching to these tunes, but the purpose originally was to create as much noise as possible in order to put fear into the hearts of the opposing forces. So if you are standing now facing, and the other army is across, and there's the battleground between the 2 of you, and the other army has got these huge, massive drums and bugles and whatnot and trumpets, and they're making this huge amount of noise. Obviously, that is intimidating. So this is one thing. The second thing they did was that armies had their fighting champions. So you had these warriors. Many of them, of course, were also physically massive, huge, 7 feet tall or something, big people, and they would be encased literally in armor. And then each of them had his own personal weapon, in which he was an expert mace man who used a mace, or you had sometimes in cavalry you had this knight who would be archers didn't come into that. This is hitting from a distance was not part of the game. It was physical combat. So what was that before the actual battle was engaged in, and the idea of this also was it was very sensible, because if you actually have to fight a battle, obviously there's a lot of loss of life, so on and so forth. So one of the reasons for doing what I'm about to narrate to you was to try to finish the battle before it begins, right? So put so much of fear into the hearts of the opposite party that they just run away, and the field is yours. So without any loss to your soldiers. Now, they were not thinking about loss to the others, loss to their own soldiers. So what they used to do was that these champions from each army would challenge champions from the other army. So if there was this big swordsman, he would say, well, who wants to come and fight this person? And then you would have a champion from the other army who would come, and the two would fight. And if your champion won, then obviously the other army would be demoralized, because your champion just killed their champion. So this is what happened to the best of their soldiers, the most powerful of their soldiers. So the others usually think, but this is what happened. That's going to happen to me. I'm not even close to that guy. So this was the purpose of these kinds of individual battles that happened. And you can, in history of medieval times and earlier, you will find this in almost every place, including, for example, in Badr, in the Battle of Badr, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, 3 champions from his side to fight 3 of the champions of the Quraysh, and the Muslims, they killed on the side of the Quraysh. The whole purpose of all of this was, which is to inflict force before they could become dangerous to you. Particular case when the army of the Bani Israel, which was commanded by Talut, met the army of the Philistines, and these two armies were arrayed, one facing the other with the battleground in between. There was this guy called Jalut. We have the story in English as well in the Bible, David and Goliath. So Jalut is Goliath and David is Dawud alayhi salam. So Dawud alayhi salam, his job at that time, he was not a warrior, he was a shepherd. And what he used to do in terms of weaponry was not really weaponry, but it was a very interesting thing. What the shepherds of the Bani Israel, and shepherds generally, you see this even to this day in Africa, you have shepherds in the Middle East and so on. They use a slingshot. Now this slingshot is not the usual thing that we find, the Y-shaped stick with a rubber band which you pull. No, this is a much more serious thing. It is actually a weapon if you look at it, and it was a leather thing, long leather thing, which had two leather thongs, very long. Maybe it was about 2 meters or so in length, and in the center of that was a flat leather pouch. Now, in that leather pouch sat the projectile, which was usually a stone. Sometimes they would also cast lead balls and use those, which were round, so it gave them more accuracy. But otherwise, they would just take round stones to give them the best accuracy. And the shepherd would put that thing in the middle, and he would hold it, and then he would hold the two ends of this thing. So it was now one long thing with this stone in the middle, and the shepherd would swing it around his head, and then he would release one of the thongs. So this string, this knot would suddenly open, and this projectile would go and hit whatever the shepherd was shooting at. Now these shepherds were extremely accurate. They were shepherds who, they used this thing for 2 reasons. One was for their own hunting, to bring down food, and usually their food was birds. So these people were accurate enough to hit a bird on a wing, right? This was general standard. I mean, they would just, you have a pigeon flying, they would fling this thing, shoot it, and the pigeon would. So if the shepherd is accurate enough to hit a flying bird, you can imagine what kind of accuracy they have, right? So this was a shepherd, the guy sitting there all day, he's doing this, and he knows his food depends on it. So they became very, very accurate with it. Second reason they used this was to guard their sheep. So especially usually they were guarding them against wolves, and obviously the shepherd didn't want to do any physical combat with the wolf. So the simplest thing was take this thing and shoot the wolf. You hit the wolf, and usually if you hit it in the head, you killed it. And even if you didn't kill it, it got a very, very painful punishment for attempting to attack your sheep. So these shepherds were extremely, extremely accurate with this slingshot, and this slingshot was a lethal weapon. Believe me, it was very, very It was very dangerous. It's very interesting. If you read medieval history, the Romans used slingshots and slingers as actual troops in battle. And the way the Roman army worked was that these slingshot shooters were the Romans didn't have bows and arrows. The Romans had three main weapons. One was slingshots, and that was the first thing that came on. Where when they were facing the army, first of all, their slingers would shoot their projectiles, and they would drop people, they would drop soldiers with their. And the Romans actually cast lead balls, and each slinger had a pouch of these lead balls, which they used, and basically the same shepherd sling which they used. The second thing of the Romans was when they were getting close to the army was javelins. So they had these spears, which they sometimes the soldier had more than one, two or three, but never more than about three, because it was a whole issue of carrying them and all that, which they would then throw javelins. And after that, it was the gladius, which was the sword, which did the work. And sword was really a standard, and it was used at close quarters. And you had the Roman legion, all the soldiers highly disciplined, standing shoulder to shoulder with their big shields. They had these shields which was 6 feet tall. They must be, so they locked the shields, and then they would stab with these gladiuses, with these weapons. They didn't have steel, they didn't have iron. Later iron they perfected, and they into making of steel and so on and so forth. So the reason I'm giving you all of this background history is because when you're looking at this David and Goliath thing, please don't get carried away by the usual thing that people say. Oh, you see, here was this poor little shepherd boy. He was so weak, and he was this and he was that, and there was this great Goliath. Goliath was a fool. Goliath was a fool, and more than likely he was a fool because he was very arrogant. He didn't recognize the weapon. He didn't understand what he was facing. Goliath, Dawud alayhi salam at that point was not a weak little boy. Dawud alayhi salam was the equivalent of somebody with a revolver, with a pistol, with 38 or 45, right? What would you say if you had this? I don't know how many of you have seen. What is that movie where this guy does this big sword thing, and then this hero, he pulls out his pistol, his revolver, and he says, "Oh, processed grass." He uses a different word. I don't want to use that word. So he says, "Oh, processed grass," and he goes bang, and that's it. End of the swordsman. That is what Dawud alayhi salam actually was. However, Goliath, Jalut, in his arrogance, didn't recognize that, and he paid the price. He paid the price of his life with that, because here was so when this thing happened. Now, to come back to the story, the two armies arrayed against in front of each other. Jalut steps forward, the champion of the Philistines. Here is this man, and Jalut is known to have been an extremely huge man as well. In the days of, today you're talking about drones and some guy sitting in a place thousands of miles away playing computer games, as a result of which somebody dies. We're not talking about it. We're talking about actual physical bravery, and we're talking about face-to-face, hand-to-hand fighting, in which physical fitness and size played a very big role. Courage, of course, played a huge role, but obviously physical fitness and size. If you were big, you had a longer reach, you had a longer weapon, you could carry a heavier weapon, which means that when you hit, that strike was much more powerful. Your own physical ability to take punishment, like somebody punches you and to you it's like a fly sat on your nose. All of these things made a big difference. So here was Jalut, here was Goliath, who was a huge guy. He was their champion, unbeaten. No one could fight him. He had this huge aura. He was famous, and so on. And he came forward and he says, "Who's there to challenge me? Send your champion." Now, the Bani Israel knew them. The Bani Israel knew Jalut, right? So these people got very frightened. They said, oh my God, what is this now? Where does this guy come from? Who's going to fight him? So Talut, the king of Bani Israel, he said, who is willing to fight this man? And nobody stepped forward, right? Nobody wanted to fight the man because they knew it is a pre-gone, foregone conclusion. It's not a question of this guy is going to kill. Whoever is going to go there is going to get killed. So it's like saying, who wants to die? Well, I'm sorry, I don't want. And at that time, Dawud alayhi salam stepped forward. He said, I will fight him. Now think about this. There's a lecture of mine on this David and Goliath theme, and I call it the 6 secrets of Dawud alayhi salam. I'll have Azhar send the link to that as well. First secret, first principle is if you want to succeed, you must step forward. It's only when you take the first step, it's only when you step forward that the rest will happen. Back, he wasn't even a soldier. I mean, imagine this young boy who's not even a soldier. That Bani Israel announces and says, who is willing to fight Jalut? He doesn't mean everybody. He means among the soldiers. He's not talking about camp followers. He's not talking about, whoever is there, embedded journalists or whoever. He's not talking about that. He's saying, who among the soldiers who is willing to fight this champion of the party? Now, Dawud alayhi salam is obviously not even counted in that. But the issue is, in leadership, if you want to lead, you have to step forward. And who decides whether that is the right step or not? You decide. We never know. I mean, the one stepping forward, when Dawud alayhi salam stepped forward, did he know that he was going to win? He didn't know that. He was confident. He hoped he could do it. So he stepped forward. Second thing to understand, as I said, first rule is, if you want something to happen, step forward. Second thing is that know your own assets. The difference, and this is my interpretation, difference between David and Goliath, between Dawud alayhi salam and Jalut, was, there was not difference, the commonality. I come to the difference in a minute. The commonality was they both knew what they had. Jalut was a swordsman. He had his huge sword. He was clad in armor, and he knew what he could do with the sword. So when he came there and he stood and he charged, he knew his slingshot. He knew what he could do. He knew how accurate. So before he went forward, he volunteered. So he has no volunteer. The only volunteer is this shepherd boy. So Talut said to him, take my shield, take my armor, take my sword. Now this is the second big lesson. Know yours, and also know what will not help you. So now Dawud alayhi salam knew this. So he said, no, I don't want all this. I don't want your sword, I don't want your armor, I don't want your shield, because I've never used any of those things. I don't know how that whole thing works. Now is not the time to learn. So I'm going to stick with what I have. So second rule is, first rule, step forward. Second rule, stick to your knitting. Stick to your core competence. You know what you can do, stay with that. I'm not against learning new skills, but the time to learn new skills is not when you are facing the opposition. It's not at the time of combat. It's not when you are faced with a challenge. So stick to your knitting, stick to your core competence. Third thing, know the strength of the enemy. Now this is the difference. Dawud alayhi salam knew the strength of Jalut. He knew what Goliath could do. So here is a man, first of all, physically he can pick me up and break me into two and throw me away with his bare hands. So he's got that kind of strength, meaning I don't want to get close to him. If he gets his hands on me, I'm finished. So I'm not going to, and I'm going to make sure that I don't go anywhere close to the guy. Number one. Number two, his sword, he is an expert in that. He knows how to wield that sword. So I am not going close to him physically, and I'm not going within his range of his sword. So no physical contact. He knows very well. Who knows? Dawud alayhi salam knows the strength of his enemy. But what about Jalut? To Jalut's biggest problem, biggest mistake which he paid for with his life was he misjudged his opposition. When Dawud alayhi salam looked, what was he seeing? He was seeing his enemy as he was. So he was able to assess the enemy with his full strength. But when Goliath looked at Dawud alayhi salam, what was he seeing? He was seeing a shepherd boy. The man has no helmet, he's got no weapons, he's got no armor, he's got no sword, he's got no shield. He's got a slingshot in his hand. What's a slingshot? He didn't know what a slingshot was. He did not know what a slingshot was. Imagine, put yourself in that position and say, supposing you are standing there with a 38, with a 45 in your hand, and you're facing an enemy who's never seen a firearm before in his life. What's he going to say? He's going to say, this man has no weapons. Because he doesn't even recognize that thing you are holding in your hand as a weapon. He doesn't know that, doesn't recognize it as a weapon. He doesn't care because he is in himself. He's got his sword. He doesn't know that his helmet is not going to protect him from a 45 bullet. The bullet will go through the metal into his brain. And that's precisely what happened with Dawud alayhi salam. Goliath, Jalut misjudged Dawud alayhi salam. So they made dua, رَبَّنَا أَفْرِقْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا وَانصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to give them victory. Dawud alayhi salam went there. There was really no battle. It was target practice as far as Dawud alayhi salam is concerned. And the target was a sitting duck. For some huge big man standing right there in front of you, a few feet from you, what is that? I mean, Dawud alayhi salam could have hit. He actually hit Goliath, Jalut, straight in his forehead, because that's where, when you wear the helmet, this piece is your eyes and so on. He's not wearing a faceplate, so his face is bare. So Dawud alayhi salam hit him in the center of his forehead. Believe me, Dawud alayhi salam could have hit him in the center of his forehead, sleeping, lying on the ground if he wanted to. He could have done that blindfolded, right? So he did that. Here was the easiest thing in the world as far as Dawud alayhi salam is concerned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to give him victory. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, go, shoot the guy. One. Salam takes his slingshot, he takes this stone, he picks up a stone, and imagine Jalut thinks, he picks up a stone. You know what the stone is when it comes inside your brain, right? He picks up the stone, he puts it, he swings it, the fire inside his head, Goliath on the floor. Jalut is dead. So, lessons to learn. Step forward. Know yourself. Level of expertise. Believe me, Dawud alayhi salam didn't learn to shoot there. He didn't learn how to, he was not practicing there. This was blindfolded work. He knew that. That was his core competence. So prepare. When you step forward, have confidence in yourself, connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then do your stuff. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you victory. As far as the world is concerned, here is this completely unmatched, completely unequal competition, completely unequal battle. You know what? I agree, except that I see it in a different way. I am saying poor Jalut. I am saying poor Goliath. completely unmatched. But the strength is not where you think it is. Goliath is not the strong guy. Daud is the strong guy. Here was this lethal character. Man, he is weak. Doesn't matter. Forget about that. This is Malakul Maut for you. Remember, arrogance comes before every fall. Jalut was arrogant. He did not know his opposition. He misjudged his opposition and he paid the price with his life. Jalut fell. Army got totally and completely demoralized. They didn't know what hit them and they ran for their lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala succeeded Talut as the king of Bani Israel. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to learn from the stories of his Anbiya alayhimus salam and to help us in ways overcome our problems. We ask Allah also to, we make the same dua. رب أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us with ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins and to be pleased with us and never to be displeased. والله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.